Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's analysis, we're going to learn how to interpret categorical variable, continuous variable, and dummy variable in regression analysis. We are going to use wealth index as our dependent variable in the interpretation, where for the continuous variable, we use age as our continuous variable, and then with dummy variable, we use gender, and that of the categorical variable, we're going to use education to do the analysis. So first, we're going to conduct a simple regression of wealth status on the continuous variable age here. So to run that regression, you type reg, then wealth index as your dependent variable followed by age. So you search for age here. Okay, so age. There you have it. So you have a simple regression here of wealth status or wealth index and age as the independent variable. Here you realize that age is positive here and the coefficient is 0.0010. Yeah, and it's highly significant. The p-value here is 0.00, meaning that it's highly significant, or it's below the 5% or 1% level of significance when compared. The t is also high, so it means that our model here is significant. The coefficient of age is significant. What it means here is that the wealth index increases by 0.001 for every unit increase in age. So if there's an additional age, or if your age increased by 1 year, or if you grow by 1 year, it means that your wealth status or your wealth will also increase by 0.001 units. Now, let's assume that this regression is on the basis that the world status increase linearly, but it's not always so. In theory, it could increase, and at a point in time, as you grow older, your wealth will reduce. So on this basis, that means you have a nonlinear regression function. So in this case, if you have age as a continuous variable, you have to include age squared. So let's generate age squared and see how the regression will look like. So generate age times age. So we have age squared generated. To run our regression again, now with the age squared variable. Perfect. So we realize that the initial age is positive and the age square here is negative. What it means here is that as you grow, your wealth status increases, and at a point in time, it reduces. What it means here is that you have an inverted U relationship. So it increases, gets to a maximum, and falls. Yeah, so that is it for continuous variable. Let's move on to a dummy variable, and we're going to use gender or sex as a dummy variable. So we look for sex in our data set. So let's just have sex and see the nature of the variable. Yeah, so we have male and then female as the indicators here. So it is a dummy variable, has two indicators. So let's run the analysis again, but this time with sex. So what you do is to include I dot. You can generate two different dummies to represent the sex. And in that case, you have to drop one as the reference indicator, or you can include I dot. So what it means here is that the regression analysis has dropped the male indicator, meaning that that is going to serve as the reference indicator, where the female indicator becomes the the variable of interest. So when you look here, you can clearly see that from judging from the p-value, it is not significant because it's above 10%. When you convert this into percentage, that's 15.4%, meaning that the coefficient of female is not significant. But when you compare the coefficient here to male, you can clearly see that the coefficient of females is 0.07 units more than female, meaning the females have 0.07 units wealth more than males do. But then there's no significant difference between males and females. Well, we can also use females as a reference indicator by including B2 here, meaning that the female should be our reference indicator. Yeah. So in that case, here we have the females as a reference indicator, but then the coefficient will also be the same, yeah, and then the significance will also be the same. But this time, we can see that the sign has changed, meaning that unlike the first one where we said the female has more wealth, a wealth which amount to 0.007 units more. The males has it less, that amount less. So it's also clearly depicting what you are saying. We can do same for categorical variable. And I think the categorical variable will be very interesting when we go through changing the reference category. Now let's go to the categorical variable. Here, we're going to use education as a categorical. Okay, so we have educat. Let's look at the nature of the educat variable by tabulating it. So we have here basic education, secondary education, and tertiary education. Now it depends on your interest. In the case where you are interested in looking at how higher education have impact world status, then you want to make basic education your reference category and make secondary and tertiary education your main indicators, where you can compare as higher education attainment on the lower education, in comparison to the lower education. So now let's look at that. So we change, put wealth here. So clearly you can see that the regression analysis here has dropped basic education and secondary and tertiary education here as the main variable or the main indicators in the education category. And they are all significant, all under 1%. The p-value here, we can clearly see the p-value here is below 1%. Right? The coefficient for secondary education is 0.8 and that of tertiary education is 1.79. Intuitively, it makes sense a lot, meaning that as you attain higher levels of education, your wealth status increases. Okay, so here when you compare those who have secondary education, you realize that their wealth status is 0.80 more than those who have basic education, and that of the tertiary education, they have 1.79 wealth more than those who have basic education. You can also play around it. You can choose to make tertiary education as the reference category. And if you want to do that, all you do is to put here B3, which means the third category as the reference. So when you run this, well, clearly you can see here that now the tertiary education is your reference category and basic education and secondary education as the main category. And all means that those who have less education, all right, have lower wealth compared to those who have higher education. And those with basic education, they have much more lower, which is negative 1.79 units lower wealth compared to those who have tertiary. And that of secondary, their wealth is lower, but not much more than the basic education. So that is it for the running and interpretation of regression analysis using continuous variable, um, dummy variable, and then categorical variable. You can have all these variables, all the variables in the regression analysis if you are running a multiple regression. So we have here age. Okay, let me just type in age and then sex. Remember to put the I dot. Yes. So if you have a multiple regression, you can have all the um, variables included. And here you can see that after I included all the variables, the level of significance for sex have been improved as well. So yes, so I mean, you have to be, depending on the kind of analysis you are conducting, you have to read the literature and understand the theories, and also based on your own intuition in terms of how the factors that impact the dependent variable, you have to know the independent variables that you have to include that will lead to improve the model. So you don't just throw in variables, but you have to make sure that you read the literature and look at what the literature is saying, and also make judgments based on theory and intuition as well in the inclusion of the independent variable. Yes, so this is how you interpret the variables in regression analysis. Generally, that is how the variables look like. Yes, continuous variable, dummy variables, and then categorical variables. Generally, these are the variables you encounter when you are running a regression analysis. Let me know if you have anything that I have left out that needs further analysis. I'll be happy to address it. Okay, don't forget to like my channel, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment.